Could soon pull the United States out of the Paris climate change agreement, leveling a massive blow to former President Obama's legacy. The pact was signed by the U.S. and nearly 200 other countries last spring. A senior administration official cautions to Fox News that the president has not yet made a final decision on the pact, but two sources say the president is expected soon to announce that the United States will withdraw from the landmark accord. We will update you as the White House updates us minutes from now. And this Fox News alert, a big development in the Russia investigation. President Trump tore into Democrats over what he calls a witch hunt of a one-time campaign aide, Carter Page. The president acting in response to this. Democrats have now indefinitely postponed hearing testimony from Carter Page as part of their investigation into Russia interference in the 2016 election. The question now, why postpone it? This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, Sandra Smith, Meghan McCain, former Deputy State Department spokesperson Marie Harf, and today's hashtag One Lucky Guy, the former Secretary of Education under President Ronald Reagan. Bill Bennett is here. And you know what he does now? He chairs the Conservative Leaders for Education and hosts the Bill Bennett podcast. Awesome. If you haven't listened in, welcome. You're outnumbered.
I am outnumbered.
Hello, Mr.
Happy
Bennett.
to be so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you
Great
for
pleasure
coming.
to be here. Thank
Yes.
Can't wait to get your thoughts. So much unfolding, particularly in the world of foreign policy.
Right.
Okay, let's get to the news. Carter Page was a former foreign policy advisor to President Trump during the campaign. He was reportedly under investigation by the FBI for his contact with Russia. Page has said he's an open book and that he wants to tell his story after the Fed started monitoring his communications last summer. So eyebrows were raised when Fox News learned yesterday Democrats have requested that Page's testimony before Congress be postponed indefinitely. President Trump unleashed his response on social media by tweeting this. So, now it is reported that the Democrats who have excoriated Carter Page about Russia don't want him to testify. He blows away their case against him and now wants to clear his name by showing the false or misleading testimony by James Comey, John Brennan. Witch hunt! Exclamation point. Your thoughts, Bill?
Well, one thing that's interesting in the era of Donald Trump, people used to say, I wonder what the president really thinks. Not so anymore. We know what the president really thinks. It's instant communication. I kind of like it. I would prefer some of them didn't make it out, but for the most part, I think it's quite good for the American people to hear directly from their president. Look, you had an interesting lead-in, Harris, as you were reading. You said, as part of the investigation, Carter Page will not testify. Why does a person not testify as part of the investigation? Justice Brandeis said sunlight is the best disinfectant. If he's got some sunlight to bring to bear on this, let's see it. Let's have it. Why would you not want to hear from this witness about whom the Washington Post and the New York Times have been writing incessantly how important he is? If he's important, let's hear from him.
Yeah, and it's a new generation of interest from Democrats, which we've talked about, Meghan, Russia, and the whole idea of it. So why not bring that disinfectant and brighten the room, if you will?
I think Mr. Bennett brings up a very important point that he obviously has something to say that Democrats don't want to hear. Otherwise, why not let him testify? He himself says, quote, I'm an open book compared to the incomplete lies that define me in the secret criminal justice system and the rest of the intelligence community last year. Any actual facts and truths I can illuminate will be a giant leap in the right direction. Doesn't sound like a guilty man to me from that quote.
Well, I spoke with some of my Democratic friends who are working on the investigation in Congress who said they do want him to testify, that they're trying right now to figure out what that looks like. Is it open session? Is it closed? Is it before, after other people testify? How does the Mueller investigation fit into some of this? There have been some reports that Mueller may want to talk to witnesses first. So I think that, what I'm hearing from my friends on the Hill who are working on this is that they do want to hear from him. They want to hear from a lot of people, and that hopefully we will, because we need to. You're right.
So maybe just a little bit disingenuous among some of them. I don't know who your sources are, but the word indefinitely certainly sticks out, right? Because if you want to postpone based on gathering more evidence, that would be one thing. But you're also dealing with something, Marie, with several investigations going on, not a drip has come out as evidence. So if you think you can get some from someone, why would you postpone indefinitely?
But to give Democrats some credit here, they have controlled the narrative when it comes to Russia. This White House has fought back hard, but still, now that the president's home from what was viewed as a very successful first foreign trip, Russia is back in the headlines. I mean, what can they do, Bill, to get that out of there so that it can get back to policymaking, get back to the president's agenda?
Well, I learned in Washington you're on offense or you're on defense. And the thing for the president is to go on offense on this. And again, I don't see how you control the narrative, particularly the narrative on Russia, by saying we're not going to hear from this witness. I've heard the argument about Mueller, and obviously Mueller's wishes have to be respected here. But I imagine if Mueller had said, no, we want to get to him first or wait, we would have heard that. That would have been yelled from the rooftops. We can't do it because of Mueller. The idea of disingenuous and Democrat is not so foreign to me, not so strange to me, that I would think there's something else. But one thing that opens up as a possibility is that we will hear from him. Perhaps not in a hearing called by the House, but if he has something to say, then by all means, let's hear from him. But look, the president continues to challenge in regard to your question, what's there? And I just don't know how long we can keep scraping this barrel.
You know what's interesting about what you said? I mean, technically, I guess, Carter Page doesn't have to wait to testify.
That's right.
He's been
on the
doing
Hill.
a lot of interviews.
He can talk any time he wants, right? I mean, we've seen others in the past who, look at Ben Rhodes, when he was wanted on the Hill among the Democrats, and they said, no, he's not going to come and testify, but he gave all sorts of media avails, if you will. So he could talk. The president could actually ask him a question.
He could give a press conference. He could be on Outnumbered. I mean, if he really wants exposure.
I love that you're programming our
Yeah, well, glad to. I want to get asked back. No, I mean, he certainly has the opportunity to speak and the right to speak, and I think it would be very interesting now to hear what he has to say. Wouldn't people be more interested now to hear what he had to say? I would be.
So, Megan, you know, this idea of let's just get to the there, which is where you have been for a while now. If there's something, let's get to it. Otherwise, what?
I know this may blow your mind, Harris, but I actually talk to people who don't work in the media quite often. It's good for me to talk to people. But people in my life don't care about Russia at all. They care about repeal and replace, and they care about tax reform, and they would like the media to move off of this until, my own personal polling, they would like the media to move off of this unless there's some concrete evidence. I don't like sitting in this sort of, phantom zone. Yes, there's smoke here. I understand. There are questions I still have. Let Carter Page testify. Let's get more information out. And for the love of God, can we move on if they can't find anything?
The House Intel Committee Chairman speaking on this. Let's watch Representative Nunes.
The Democrats don't want an investigation on Russia. They want an independent commission. Why do they want an independent commission? Because they want to continue the narrative that Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump are best friends, and that's the only reason why he won, because Hillary Clinton could have never lost on her own, so it had to be someone else's fault.
All right, so best friends with Putin, chums, whatever the situation, you still need evidence if you're going to investigate someone.
Yeah, you sure do. Isn't it a little odd, too, that the president's for strengthening NATO when he's best friends with Russia? Let's remember why NATO was created, to defend against Russia. So that needs to be borne in mind. Look, I agree with those on the Republican side who say, why doesn't the Republican Party advance its agenda? Let's get these... Up on Megan's point, Democrat citizens and Republican citizens alike would like to get off this subject and get to some of the real issues.
But to that point,
hearkening back to President Reagan's White House, what lesson would you draw from there and maybe give to President Trump in terms of gaining the narrative, going on the offense, as you say, and moving forward?
I remember I spoke to President Reagan in the midst of the Iran-Contra deal, and I called him up and I spoke to him. I did it very rarely, but I said, they don't want you just to apologize and explain. They want you to humble yourself, to crawl. And he said, well, I won't. I will tell the truth. I'll say what we did, and some of what we did wasn't right, and then we will get back to our business. I think that's the best way. Once you say, one thing I learned as Secretary of Education that as drugs are, is if you make a mistake, say so. That gives your opposition very little to go on. Say, I made that mistake. I won't make it again. I'm not exactly sure what the mistake was here with Russia, because I still don't think, to quote the poet, there's any there.
Well, okay. So Megan has sometimes put this up, and this was the mistake. I've heard you say it, and it was kind of that nebulous area of whether or not they were friends in the very beginning and how he, maybe not friendship, but certainly revered the strength of this president of Russia.
Sure.
I never liked the language surrounding Putin, but I'm very hardline on Russia and Vladimir Putin. And I do think some of that, much like the rhetoric on the campaign trail with the travel ban, has come back to bite this administration. But I do think if you move forward and tweet about repeal and replace, about tax reform, or tweet about jobs, talk about the things that the American public, I believe, truly cares about, and just let's say, you know what, we're going to leave this to the investigation. I'm not going to have anything to do with this. We're going to make America great again. I think that would help the narrative, Sandra.
But to get back to Bill's point and your point, Megan, the American people are over with Russia. They're kind of done with this, considering there's absolutely no evidence. And they want to focus on tax reform. They want to focus on the president's agenda and health care. Slow things down.
Sure.
I mean, what about tax reform by the end of the year? Can that even happen?
Sure, it slows things down, which is the object of the game, which is why the Democrats are doing it, and their friends in the press resist and stop and get in the way and obfuscate. That is the name of the game. The president has to. That's why he has to get organized on a couple of issues and push them through. I would think taxes.
Where would you say this
foremost.
obstruction is historically? Is this unprecedented?
I've never seen anything like it. I mean, I saw the criticisms of Ronald Reagan, my boss. The worst thing I think I ever saw was Quayle, the attacks on Quayle. But this is unprecedented in its viciousness, which I guess we'll talk about later.
Obstruction and leaking. That's a deadly combination.
Yeah, no, but I mean,
politically.
it's vindictive. They do not think he's legitimate.
Well, I've heard you say tax reform, if we don't see that by the end of the year, some of the numbers that we're seeing on Wall Street might not hold.
But many Republicans are still promising it.
Yeah, they have to, and they have to deliver it.
Well, au revoir, Paris. That's the only French I speak, even though I sit next to Sandra, and her French is beautiful. President Trump expected to pull the United States out of the Paris Climate Accord, the signal the president is sending to the world and to his voters. Plus, no one is laughing. The massive backlash over a liberal comedian's photograph with a mock severed head that looks like President Trump's. We ask, is there any line the president's critics won't cross? Stay close.
America is now making history, but not in the way we ever intended. We are now over 19 and a half
certificate.
But this is a limited time offer.
Call now.
Call now for your free awning idea kit with DVD and $200 discount certificate. There's no obligation.
The world has officially crossed the threshold for the Paris Agreement to take effect. Today, the world meets the moment. And if we follow through on the commitments that this Paris Agreement embodies, history may well judge it as a turning point for our planet.
Former President Obama last October hailing the Paris Climate Accord, which he considers one of his biggest achievements in the White House. But President Trump may be about to deal a massive blow to the Obama legacy. According to Fox News sources, he's expected to pull the U.S. out of the landmark agreement. This, as Axios reports, Mr. Trump has already started consulting senior officials on the exit process. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts joins us live with more as we await what happens next. John?
Sandra, good afternoon to you. With the caveat, of course, as we always issue, that the president could change his mind and come up with a different decision than people think that he has made already. I was told by a very, very senior administration official this morning as we encountered each other in the hallway that the president is still weighing a lot of options. He has not yet made a final decision, but is expected to, if not today, sometime before the end of the week. The president tweeted out as much that he would be making a decision in the coming days. So where are we right now? A couple of sources tell Fox News that the president is expected to withdraw the United States from the Paris Climate Accord, but a very senior administration source told Fox News that, well, there might be a little bit of a different decision coming forward. It could kind of be a Solomon-esque decision where you split the Paris Climate Accord, you withdraw from the Green Climate Fund, which the United States has committed to, but you stay within the framework of the agreement. Not sure, though, how doing that would address the central question that the president is worried about, and that is that by adhering to the strict protocols of the 2015 Paris Climate Accord, the president believes that the United States will begin to suffer in terms of its competitiveness with manufacturing and job creation and start to fall behind countries like China and India. And that's something that the president just won't stand for. He made a commitment during the election campaign to bring back manufacturing in the United States, to create more jobs, and that if he sees something like the Paris Climate Accord as being a threat to that campaign promise, he's going to have to try to figure a way either around it or out of it. So right now there is a plan that could get him kind of around it, but not sure if that's going to fly with the president. Sandra, I think it's probably safe to say that he has come to a tentative decision, but is not yet fully comfortable with it and wants just a little more time deliberating what could happen here before he goes ahead and pulls the trigger. Don't forget, last week he spent a lot of time with our allies in Europe and with our allies in Japan. Climate change was a big topic of discussion at the G7. The president was said to have, quote, evolved on his thinking, that according to his chief economic advisor, Gary Cohn. But again, coming down to this basic idea that he does not want to sacrifice American competitiveness, particularly when it comes to manufacturing and job creation, and that will be foremost in his mind when he makes a decision what to do about whether or not to pull the U.S. out of the climate accord. Sandra?
All right, John Roberts, thank you for that reporting live from the White House. Bill Bennett, so let's go with the reporting that we have on this now, and that the president may be leaning towards pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord. What would the impact of that be?
Well, he'll get a lot of criticism, wide and broad criticism from the left, and I imagine some in the middle. He was getting criticism for this when he was in Europe. Interestingly, I thought somewhat ironically, while he was talking about beefing up NATO and gave a speech about Manchester, he was being protested on these grounds by the Europeans. I think the right decision is to pull out, not to try to do the Solomon-esque thing, as John said, because he'll be criticized either way. He should make it clean and make it clear that this is a work of fiction, that they're really, these goals are fictional. The Chinese promise to deliver by the year 2030 is the same as if they did nothing. What he should point to instead is what the United States has done, not by signing an accord, but what it's done in its own country. Hydraulic fracking as we call it, has reduced carbon emissions in this country by 2% last year and about 14% in 10 years. That's more important.
So if you were advising the president, you would say stick on that message.
Yes, but again, as I said earlier, stay on offense. Say, look what we have done, and we are better than almost any other country in terms of that particular record.
Already, Megan, this stirred things up last week when he postponed this decision. Now that we await this decision and know where the president may be leaning, your thoughts?
Well, first and foremost, I'm curious about the internal politics of this, because it's been reported that Jared and Ivanka want him to stay in the Paris Agreement, that Steve Bannon and some of his more loyalists want him to pull out of this. This was a campaign promise that he ran on. He has publicly said he thinks climate change is a hoax. So no one should be surprised necessarily that he, more than likely will end up pulling out of this. The United States is the largest carbon dioxide emitter behind China. The problem with his agreement I always had is, like Mr. Bennett just pointed out, China's involvement in this, 2030, I mean, I'm going to be kind of old in 2030. The idea that anything's going to be done by 2030, it's sort of I always thought it was a really nice illusion of actually getting things done when it comes to fighting climate change. I'm not someone who thinks it's a hoax, but I'm also not a doomsday person when it comes to this either. I'm somewhere in the middle. So I wish it was a little clearer. I wish it was a little better. But from the beginning, I thought it was a flawed
But even though he had in the past called it a hoax, he then put in place Rex Tillerson, who has acknowledged climate change as the Secretary of State.
And Rex Tillerson reportedly argued to stay in. The head of Exxon wrote President Trump a personal letter asking him to stay in the agreement. The oil companies support this. Today in the U.S., we have 3 times as many solar jobs as we do coal jobs. So what do you get from pulling out of it? You anger the rest of the world, 200 countries who signed on to it.
What do you get out of it? Let me just break in. America first. He promised this to those who voted for him.
Mean that's a statement. That's not a policy. And the rest of the world
it can be a policy.
Well, the rest of the world is looking to us. And 200 countries. The only countries who didn't sign on to this, Syria and Nicaragua. Is that the company we want to be in?
So the rest of the world doesn't have our economy, and it might work out for the private sector in this country to step up if it really benefits them. They'll figure this out too, and they will participate in a rate that the government probably couldn't legislate even if it tried. It's called a free market.
But
that's what we do.
We are sending a signal to the world that we are not
with our economy as well as we can with any other kind of policy. Bill?
But back to the point about carbon emissions, they're down 2% last year. They're down significantly
because
over 10
of our
years.
policies that we put in place in the Obama administration, including this.
No, it's preceded the Obama administration.
Way before.
This country has gotten a lot cleaner over the last 20 years. They started long before Obama, but they were continued there. In terms of your point about second behind China, yeah, but if every country did what we have done over the last 12 years.
ultimately with this deal was the problem too. The United States had a larger burden.
That's right.
We have so much more to get to. A massive explosion in Afghanistan. Dozens of people killed in the worst attack Kabul has seen since the drawdown of foreign forces 3 years ago. Is it time for President Trump to send more troops to keep the region safe? Plus, the U.S. conducting a successful missile defense test as the threat from North Korea is growing. Whether the U.S. has more leverage now and the message this sends to North Korea and Iran.
For over 200 years, the stock market has been going up and down like a roller coaster. And it seems like everybody's getting
Fox News alert. We now know 11 American citizens were hurt in a massive bombing in Afghanistan's capital city. The explosion ripping through a highly secure diplomatic area of Kabul during the morning rush. At least 90 people are dead, hundreds more injured, including those 11 U.S. citizens. Most of the casualties were civilians. We're told employees of the German embassy were also hurt. So far, no group is claiming responsibility, but it was one of the worst attacks in the Afghan capital since the drawdown of foreign forces at the end of 2014. And it comes as President Trump is weighing whether to send more troops to the region to reinforce the Afghan army. I'll start with you, Mr. Bennett. Sending more troops in, it's a very complicated issue, but when you hear that the city of Kabul, which is supposed to be the most safe in Afghanistan and most diplomatic, has such a huge explosion, what do you think?
Well, first I'd talk to Jim Mattis, who has been nothing if not eloquent on these matters and who is quite expert. But I think it underscores the fact that we don't have enough people in Afghanistan. This has to be explained to the American people. People say, well, Americans are tired of this or overstretched. They don't get tired of our military operating where it should if they believe it has an object and an end to it. And I think that's what's critical. But he needs to talk to Mattis. I think we need more soldiers there. I've noticed in the last incidents the presence of Afghan police, Afghan military in all these incidents. Nothing against them, but Americans are better. But you don't have enough Americans to do it. Look, we are really starting to squeeze these guys now all over the globe, as Mattis said, not just to control, but to annihilate them. And I hope he keeps up the heat.
And it's a great point to make because you certainly saw the respect that President Trump gets for his national security team.
You bet.
When he was traveling abroad.
You bet.
It was very present.
You bet.
How important do you think it is at this point that we have a president who so closely not just listens to but works with generals? I mean, we haven't seen this many generals even be considered for cabinet positions in many years. I think since maybe President Nixon. Very different from what we saw with President Obama.
Oh yeah, it is very different. And this is the president who said, I know more than the generals. And he proceeds to hire some of the best generals around. I think Mattis and Kelly are terrific. I remember Tom Cotton, Senator Cotton, saying, I think the Mattis appointment is great. When we had breakfast, he said, but I hope he hires Kelly too. That'll really do it. And Kelly has been tremendous. Terrific. Look, you have civilian control of the military. That's something your dad has underscored and reminds us of. And that means the final decision's made by civilians. But in terms of assessing the situation, you want a Mattis or a Kelly doing that.
Yeah. Marie, what's your reaction to this? It's the holy month of Ramadan when this explosion's happening.
Look, these are horrific attacks, and the fact that you have not just the Taliban, but ISIS and other groups in Afghanistan that can still do this is very problematic. What I would say is if we decide to send more troops, we need, exactly as you said, Bill, a very clear articulation of what the mission is. This is now the longest war in our nation's history. And if we just keep sending American men and women over there, I think we owe it to them, to their families, and to all of us to say, is the goal getting rid of the Taliban? Because that's probably not a real that. And so talk to Mattis, talk to the military commanders, because if we just send more troops without that, I think that's a problem.
Can I ask you a question? Because you're putting it now on Republicans bicamerally. They obviously control what's happening. Yeah, right now they do. Your party lost over 1,000 seats, but we won't get into that. But for the last 8 years, what was the plan for Democrats? Like you're looking for this administration to say what is the end game. Then it's more than fair to ask, well, what has it been? Because that's what's gotten us here.
Right. Well, a lot has gotten us here. Right. The Bush administration and the Obama administration both spent a lot of time, treasure, and American men and women in Afghanistan.
The dominant time of the last 10 years was the last 8. Go.
Well, Afghanistan's been going on longer than that, but setting that aside, the Obama administration plan in Afghanistan was to refocus our resources there when so many had been taken to Iraq, to put more resources towards going after al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and Pakistan, which we did with some success, and then to start to bring troops home as we transfer control to the Afghans. And as Bill said, that's been a problem. The Afghans haven't had as much capability as we wanted, as
well, and
quickly
now you
as
have
we
ISIS
wanted.
On the ground there.
And you have ISIS there now. So our strategy was focused on al-Qaeda and focused on capacity building in Kabul. That's a challenging thing to do, as all of us know.
Explain what the objectives are, explain how long it will take, what you think the possibilities are, and then proceed. But don't have this kind of World War I situation, 20 feet one day, 30 feet the next day. Explain it in plain terms and say some of these situations are very difficult and complex. We can't lay it out in explicitly linear ways, but I think the president can do that. Look, I think we do have them on the run in a lot of places, so now's the time to keep up the heat, increase the heat.
Yeah, and that was part of what was said was behind Manchester, England, that we have these guys, these scorpions running now, and so they're going to hit in these softer areas.
That's
so, all right. Well, we'll move on now with some new video. I don't know if you've seen this. The Pentagon successfully Pacific Ocean yesterday. We talked about it on Outnumbered because it was coming. The missile defense test comes amid the growing threat from North Korea, but experts say the system still has a long way to go. Syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer calling the test a significant move. Watch.
It's a big deal, and it's just in time. I mean, we really are reaching a point in history where we are going to be susceptible to a rogue state, meaning North Korea, could be Iran later, hitting the homeland with a nuclear weapon, and we need a way to shoot it down. As of a few years ago, we had no way to do it. Americans didn't understand that if a missile is launched at us, there's no way to stop it. It's going to hit, it's going to kill.
All right, you and I spoke just before the show today, and you said, I have a bit of a history lesson I want to drop the mic on. I put in the drop the mic, but go ahead.
I don't know what that means. You're
going to have a big word on this.
Okay, good. All right. No, well, just this. You were talking about criticism of presidents. There were few things for which Ronald Reagan was criticized more than Star Wars. People made fun of it, this missile defense idea. Nevertheless, he believed in it, and he worked to develop it. The interesting bit of history here is Reagan at Reykjavik in Iceland, when he met with Gorbachev. Remember the meeting which he thought ended badly, but when he got on the plane, Charles Wick, who was with him, said, "Today you won the Cold War." One of the reasons, as Ken Edelman writes in his book, is that Gorbachev heard about Star Wars, these plans that the president had, and thought they were much farther advanced than they actually were. We had like 5 guys in a laboratory, doing drawings. Gorbachev's intelligence told him that we were way far along on this and almost ready to deploy, and that brought Gorbachev to the negotiating table. So we have a lot to be grateful for Star Wars, but this thing that happened is good. As you probably have heard, people say the bullet hitting the bullet. It only happens now about 50% of the time. We got to get those numbers up, that percentage up.
But part of this is that the test didn't confirm that this could actually be done as accurate as it was under wartime conditions.
That's right.
A big part of that story.
And if you have a lot of missiles coming, that's another problem.
That being said, do you think that President Trump is successful in the message that he is sending to North Korea right now?
Yes, I do. I think it's been very clear and very firm. I'm wondering where this is going to end up.
What is the message, as you understand it, to North Korea from the White House?
Don't mess with us, because it's going to end badly for you. And I predict, and I've predicted for about 6 months, that we're going to see some thunder and lightning.
So military experts, though, have said that could be some of the most disastrous and hand-to-hand combat type stuff. It's like
the weekend.
It's terrible what could come over the horizon with regard to that.
It could be terrible, but I don't think it has to lead to that. We'll see. I mean, at some point, there have to be some sane people in North Korea who will take Kim Jong-un aside or put him aside.
He hasn't fed them to wild dogs already.
Well, and missile defense has to be part of a larger strategy to counter North Korea, because exactly as you said, the technology is good, it's getting better, but it's not perfect. And we need a strategy to counter North Korea's ballistic missile and nuclear programs, and it can't just be the bullet-on-bullet missile defense. We deployed a lot of missile defense, Romania, South Korea, other places in our administration. It's not the end-all end-all be-all perfect solution.
But I guess proving that we can successfully do that is at least a step in the right direction.
And it sends a good message. I absolutely agree. It sends a message that we're getting better at this, but it is not the solution in and of itself.
And it's a message to more than North Korea as well.
That's true.
And do we have the budget to continue this? $244 million for what we did yesterday, which is basically brandished our...
The answer is yes.
Right?
Well, first
so we're going to need more. We're going to need more in the budget, do you think?
First responsibility of government is the security of citizens. Federalist paper number 3. It's got to be.
All right.
That's what you pay for. That's what you buy government for. Not to fix the leaky faucet of every leaking life.
Wow.
Right.
Glad you're here. You having fun?
Yeah.
Ooh, I think topic. We're glad you're here.
Is there a place to apply for tenure, permanent?
Only if you bring like cake and ice cream.
Okay. How about books? No, books don't count.
We do read.
I know you
Okay, comedian Kathy Griffin begging for forgiveness now after facing backlash from both sides of the political aisle for posing in photographs showing her holding up a mock severed head resembling President Trump. Is her apology enough, or should she and the photographer face harsher consequences?
Would you like to own an asset that has the potential for a 60% increase?
For $19 a month. Give your family the security it needs at a price you can afford. Since 1985, SelectQuote has saved over 1 million families millions of dollars on life insurance. Call now, 800-772-8300, or go to SelectQuote.com. Discover what over 1 million families know now. We shop, you save.
Comedian Kathy Griffin begging for forgiveness after facing fierce backlash from Republicans and Democrats alike for posing in pictures showing her holding up a mock severed head resembling President Trump. Here's part of her apology.
I sincerely apologize. I am just now seeing the reaction of these images. I'm a comic. I crossed the line. I moved the line, then I cross it. I went way too far. The image is too disturbing. I understand how it offends people. It wasn't funny. I get it.
That came after outrage started pouring in on social media. Donald Trump Jr. writing, quote, disgusting but not surprising. This is the left today. They consider this acceptable. Imagine if a conservative did this to Obama as POTUS. Even liberals like Chelsea Clinton are slamming the photos. She writes, quote, this is vile and wrong. It is never funny to joke about killing a president. Meantime, CNN says it is now, quote, evaluating its New Year's Eve coverage that Griffin co-hosts with Anderson Cooper. There's so much to say about this, Harris. I'll kick it off. So the most disturbing part about this to me is that Barron, who was 11 years old, saw this on television, thought his father had actually, I don't know, been killed one way or another. That's a way to traumatize a child for life. We have a tweet from Melania that says, Kathy Griffin, excuse me, is from the president. Kathy Griffin should be ashamed of herself. My children, especially my 11-year-old son, Barron, are having a hard time with this. Sick.
Yeah, so if CNN decides to put her back on, they're going to have to answer a couple questions. I'll just start with this one. Why is Kathy Griffin rolling ISIS style? Like, who on the planet thinks it's okay to showcase that? And the family of Daniel Pearlman, James Foley, Americans to compare our president, our White House, our government, our country to by holding up a bloodied head. I mean, ISIS style.
So
why?
I like comedy. I have worked with comedians before, and this isn't comedy, and the excuse that I'm just a comedian, so I crossed the line. No, I think this is 100% intentional. I know this woman's work. I think she wants to be talked about on Fox News. I think she wants to get attention. She hasn't had a hit in a really long time.
I just feel sorry for the servicemen and women who have chimed in on this, who say, I put myself on the front line to defend the free speech of someone like you. Melania has spoken out on this, and she wrote on Twitter, quote, as a mother, a wife, and a human being, that photo is very disturbing. When you consider some of the atrocities happening in the world today, a photo opportunity like this is simply wrong and makes you wonder about the mental health of the person who did it.
Yeah, one remedy, I mean, it's not full, but I was director of National Drug Control Policy, Drug Czar, had a lot of briefings, international stuff, security stuff, and with State Department, CIA, and spent a fair amount of time with Secret Service on threats, because we had a lot of threats, because we were making some real progress. I think she should have an hour, a tough hour and a half with the Secret Service.
Well, and she is on the radar of Secret Service. They are looking at this.
She has to be for that, and I think the seriousness of those people in interrogation of her will, I think, underscore the point that you don't mess around with this. But this proves the earlier point I was making. Never have I seen it like this. Not just the vehemence, not just the degree of passion, but the vindictiveness, the meanness, the ugliness, as you said, ISIS style. Why would anyone mimic ISIS style?
Hate.
Well, and CNN shouldn't have her on New Year's Eve. I think we can all agree that CNN should not.
Sure.
I think that this is disgusting, but I also want to say that this, I mean, Donald Trump Jr., this doesn't represent the left. As the person on the couch...
You know what? He's 11.
No,
you're talking about Donald Trump.
Who tweeted and said this is the left today. I am as horrified about it as any of us are, and it doesn't represent the left that I know. And I do think that we're in a really negative, gross place right now. I also think that President Obama, not the same way, but also got a lot of particularly racial hatred. It doesn't make any of it okay, but
Why are you even including that in this discussion?
Well, because we were talking about...
That just seems inappropriate.
Well, no, because Bill Bennett said this is the worst time we've ever seen it. I remember I had things mailed to my home about the president that
I grew up in politics since I was a child.
Exactly.
You don't get a lot of this from me. It's hard all the way around. Nobody ever put my father's head severed, holding it up one way or the other. Nobody did that to Obama. This is a next level. I'm sorry, but my father was elected office before I was born.
It's also not a competition about which is worse.
But you're saying that you brought it up that way.
You made it up that way.
I said that for the last 8 years when I served in that administration, the hatred, the vile threats we got mailed to the White House were awful too.
This is something that our enemy does to our people when they capture them.
I'm not defending it in any way, you guys.
So let's not compare it to anything racial or anything like that, because I think this stands alone. This
I started off by saying
So do you think Democrats are speaking out against this strongly enough today? Because Al Franken wants to do an appearance with her.
I think...
What?
Yeah, that's what's being reported. We'll see if it happens.
The Democrats have and should continue, because this does not represent
What
the left.
should they say?
It's this simple. If Fox had a host that did this to Obama, they would probably be in jail, and they certainly wouldn't be hosting New Year's Rockin' Eve with their biggest commentator.
Well,
they haven't fired her yet. She's still hosting New Year's.
I think that's the point. I mean, there are haters and there are crazy people.
Yes.
And they come out of the woodwork on all sides. But this is a, quote, celebrity, or at least a minor celebrity of sorts. And there's a debate going on at CNN. A debate going on at CNN. There shouldn't be a debate.
They're reviewing it, I think, is the way.
I wonder why we don't know the questions, because sometimes those questions leak out of CNN for the debates.
Okay, we got to move on. The president of Harvard is encouraging the class of 2017 to embrace free speech or risk being caught up in liberal bubbles. But she also appeared to take a swipe at conservative views, saying hateful ideas cannot be ignored. Did she undermine her own argument, and has censorship on campus gone too far? We'll ask our one lucky guy and former education secretary coming up next.